Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a simple penny. Most people would barely look at it before dropping it into a jar or spending it without a second thought. But what if that ordinary-looking penny was quietly worth far more than 1 cent? What if a coin made more than 80 years ago could still capture the attention of collectors today and, in certain cases, be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? Today we're exploring the fascinating story behind the 1940 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that might seem common at first glance but holds a surprising place in American coin history. The 1940 Lincoln penny is part of one of the most recognizable coin series ever produced in the United States. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. Before that time, American coins rarely featured real historical figures. But the design honoring Lincoln quickly became popular, and it has remained in circulation in different forms for more than a century. When we talk about a 1940 penny with no mint mark, we are referring to a coin that was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. During that time, coins made in Philadelphia typically did not carry a mint mark. Other mints, like Denver or San Francisco, used small letters such as D or S to identify where the coin was produced. So if you find a 1940 penny with no letter under the date, it means it came from the historic Philadelphia Mint. The year 1940 was an interesting moment in American history. The United States was just beginning to recover from the effects of the Great Depression. Across the world, World War II had already begun, though the United States had not yet entered the conflict. During this period, everyday coins like the Lincoln penny continued to circulate through American pockets, stores, and banks, becoming part of daily life. The 1940 Lincoln penny was struck in large numbers. In fact, the Philadelphia Mint produced more than 586 million pennies that year. That might sound like an enormous number, and it is. But here's where things become interesting. Even coins that were produced in huge quantities can become valuable over time depending on their condition, their rarity and high grades, and any unusual minting mistakes. To understand why collectors care about this coin, we need to look closely at its design. On the front of the coin, also known as the obverse, you will see the right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This famous design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Along the top edge of the coin are the words, "In God we trust." To the left of Lincoln's portrait is the word liberty, and the date 1940 appears on the right side. On the back of the coin, known as the reverse, you will find a design often called the wheat reverse. Two wheat stalks curve along the left and right sides of the coin, framing the words 1 cent in the center. Above that appears the phrase United States of America, and at the very top is the motto E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. Because of those two wheat stalks, collectors often refer to these coins simply as wheat pennies. The metal composition of the 1940 Lincoln penny is another important detail. At the time, pennies were made primarily of copper, containing about 95% copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. This gave the coin its familiar reddish-brown color when new. Over the decades, exposure to air, moisture, and handling slowly changes that color, turning many older pennies darker brown. Collectors pay very close attention to these color differences. A 1940 penny that still has much of its original red copper shine is far more desirable than one that has darkened with age. That is why condition plays such a major role in determining value. Now here's where things start to get exciting. While millions of 1940 pennies exist, truly well-preserved examples are much harder to find. Most coins from that era circulated for many years. They passed through countless hands, cash registers, and coin jars. Every scratch, nick, and worn detail slowly reduced the coin's quality. Because of that, collectors place a premium on coins that appear almost untouched. In the coin collecting world, this condition is often called mint state, meaning the coin shows little to no signs of wear from circulation. A typical worn 1940 penny with no mint mark might only be worth a few cents or perhaps $1 to a casual collector. But once the condition improves, the value can increase dramatically. A sharply preserved 1940 Lincoln penny with strong details and original red color can sell for many times its face value. Auction records show that some high-grade examples have reached impressive prices. Coins graded in extremely high mint state conditions have sold for hundreds of dollars, and in rare cases even more when the color and strike quality are exceptional. This surprises many people because they assume all pennies are basically the same. Another factor that can increase the value of a 1940 penny is the possibility of mint errors. Mint errors happen when something unusual occurs during the striking process at the mint. These mistakes can include doubled letters, off-center strikes, or planchet issues where the metal blank was flawed before the coin was struck. Collectors love mint errors because they are accidental and often very limited in number. While major errors on 1940 pennies are not extremely common, some examples with noticeable doubling or striking anomalies have attracted significant interest among specialists. So how can you tell if you might have a real 1940 Lincoln penny with no mint mark? The first step is simple observation. Look directly below the date on the front of the coin. If there is no small letter such as D or S, the coin was struck in Philadelphia. Next, examine the overall design. Lincoln's portrait should have clear details, especially around the hair and jawline if the coin is in good condition. The wheat stalks on the reverse should also show individual grain lines if the coin has not been heavily worn. Weight and size can also help confirm authenticity. A genuine 1940 Lincoln penny typically weighs about 3.11 grams and measures about 19 millimeters in diameter. If a coin is drastically lighter, heavier, or looks unusually thick or thin, it may be damaged or possibly counterfeit. Another useful step is using a magnifying glass or coin loupe. This allows you to inspect small details such as lettering and surface texture. Authentic coins usually have consistent lettering and natural wear patterns, while fakes sometimes show uneven details or strange surfaces. One fun fact about the 1940 penny is that many people may have unknowingly owned one at some point. Because these coins were produced in such large quantities, they circulated widely for decades. It's entirely possible that older generations spent them without realizing they would someday become collectible pieces of history. Another interesting detail is how these coins connect us to a different era of America. Think about the year 1940. Radios were the main source of home entertainment. Cars looked completely different from those on the road today, and people used cash for nearly every purchase. Each penny moved through countless daily transactions, silently witnessing history as the world changed around it. Collectors today often describe wheat pennies as one of the most enjoyable areas of coin collecting. They are affordable enough for beginners, yet full of history and variety. The 1940 no mint mark penny fits perfectly into that story. It may not be the rarest coin ever produced, but it represents a time when American coins were still made primarily from copper and designed with timeless simplicity. Another reason collectors love this coin is the thrill of searching for better examples. Someone might start with a worn piece found in pocket change, then slowly upgrade to a cleaner coin, and eventually hope to find one with bright red color that looks almost the way it did when it left the mint. Even today, coin hunters still search rolls of pennies from banks or old family collections hoping to discover wheat pennies hidden among modern coins. And every once in a while, a 1940 Lincoln cent appears, reminding collectors that small treasures can still be found in unexpected places. What makes this story even more fascinating is that coins like the 1940 penny were never intended to be collectibles. They were simply tools for everyday commerce. Yet decades later, they have become historical artifacts that connect us to the past. When you hold a coin like this, you are holding a piece of American history. That tiny copper disc may have traveled through grocery stores, train stations, movie theaters, and countless other places during a time when the world looked very different from today. So the next time you come across an old penny, take a closer look. Check the date. Look for the mint mark. Examine the details and color, because sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest stories. And who knows? That quiet little penny sitting in a jar or tucked inside an old drawer might just be a 1940 Lincoln cent waiting to be rediscovered. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into an old jar of pennies, pulling out a small brown coin, and discovering that the little piece of copper in your hand has been quietly traveling through American history for more than 80 years. At first glance, it looks ordinary. It is just a penny. But what if that simple coin holds a story from a world on the edge of war? A time when every coin carried the image of a president who had helped shape the nation. Today we are exploring the 1941 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of Americans used in everyday life, yet one that collectors still search for with excitement. The 1941 Lincoln penny is part of the famous Lincoln cent series that began in 1909. That year marked the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and the United States decided to honor him with a coin that would circulate in the pockets of ordinary citizens. It was the first time in American history that a real person appeared on a regularly circulating coin. Before that, coins usually showed symbols like Lady Liberty. The Lincoln penny changed that tradition forever. The design was created by Victor David Brenner. On the front of the coin, known as the obverse, you see the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head is the word liberty, while the date appears to the right side. The phrase "In God We Trust" sits along the top edge of the coin. On the back, which collectors call the reverse, two wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America. Because of those wheat stalks, these coins are often called wheat pennies or wheat cents. Now let's talk about the specific coin from 1941. When collectors say a penny has no mint mark, it means the coin was produced at the main United States Mint facility in Philadelphia. During that time, coins from Philadelphia usually did not carry a mint mark. Pennies made in Denver had a small letter D, and those made in San Francisco had the letter S. But the 1941 penny without any letter under the date came from Philadelphia. In 1941, the world was changing rapidly. Europe was already deep in World War II, and although the United States had not yet officially entered the war, the country was preparing for uncertain times. Factories were expanding, industry was growing, and millions of Americans were working to support the economy. Coins like the 1941 Lincoln penny were part of everyday life, used to buy newspapers, candy, and basic household items. The United States Mint produced a huge number of pennies that year. In Philadelphia alone, more than 800 million 1941 Lincoln cents were struck. That sounds like an enormous number, and it is. Because so many were made, most 1941 pennies are not considered extremely rare today. But condition makes a huge difference. Many of those coins circulated heavily for decades, becoming worn down and losing their original shine. When a 1941 no-mint mark penny is found in pristine condition, collectors take notice. These coins were originally made from a bronze alloy that contained about 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. The metal gives the coin its rich reddish color when it is new. Over time, exposure to air and handling causes the surface to darken into the brown color most people recognize. Collectors often describe the color of copper coins using 3 categories. Red means the coin still has most of its original bright copper luster. Red-brown means it shows a mix of original color and darker toning. Brown means the coin has mostly aged into the darker shade. A 1941 penny that remains bright red after more than 80 years is much harder to find, which makes those examples more valuable. Even though the 1941 Philadelphia penny was produced in large numbers, there are certain details that can make individual coins more interesting. One area collectors look closely at is the sharpness of the strike. When a coin is struck clearly, Lincoln's hair and facial features appear crisp, and the wheat lines on the reverse stand out strongly. A strong strike combined with original red color can turn a common coin into a collector's prize. There are also a few minor varieties and small errors that specialists enjoy searching for. Sometimes coins were struck slightly off-center, or the lettering appears a little doubled due to a shift in the die during the minting process. These kinds of variations are usually subtle, but when they appear clearly, they can add to the value of the coin. So how much can a 1941 no-mint mark Lincoln penny actually be worth? The answer depends almost entirely on condition. A heavily circulated example that has spent decades passing through cash registers might only be worth a few cents to a collector. But when the coin is preserved in excellent shape, the story changes. A bright, uncirculated 1941 penny with strong detail and original luster can sell for several dollars, sometimes much more depending on the grade assigned by professional coin grading services. Coins graded in the highest mint state levels can bring significantly higher prices. In rare cases, beautifully preserved red examples have sold for hundreds of dollars at auction. For example, a top-quality 1941 Lincoln cent graded at a very high mint state level has sold for over $100 in collector markets. The reason is simple. Out of hundreds of millions of coins produced, only a small number survive in nearly perfect condition. Time, circulation, and handling gradually reduce the supply of pristine coins. If you are curious about checking your own coins, there are a few simple things to look for. First, examine the date carefully. Make sure it clearly reads 1941 and that there is no small letter under the date. If there is a D or an S, then the coin was made in Denver or San Francisco instead of Philadelphia. Next, look at the overall condition of the coin. Are Lincoln's hair details visible, or are they worn smooth? Do the wheat stalks on the back show clear lines, or are they flattened? The more detail that remains, the more collectible the coin might be. Another helpful step is to check the color of the coin. If the surface still shows a bright copper tone with strong shine, that could indicate the coin has been well preserved. However, it is important not to clean old coins. Cleaning can damage the surface and actually reduce their value in the eyes of collectors. You might also want to weigh the coin if you have a precise scale. A standard Lincoln wheat penny from this era typically weighs about 3.11 grams. If the weight is dramatically different, it might indicate damage, heavy wear, or in rare cases a different type of metal. One interesting fact about the 1941 penny is that it was minted just before a major change in American coinage. Only 2 years later, in 1943, the United States Mint switched from copper pennies to steel pennies coated with zinc. This change happened because copper was needed for wartime supplies like ammunition and electrical wiring. So the 1941 penny represents one of the last years before that dramatic shift. Another fun detail is that these coins witnessed a remarkable period in American history. Many 1941 pennies were already circulating when the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred later that same year. That means the coin in your hand might have been carried by someone living through one of the most important moments of the 20th century. Collectors today love wheat pennies partly because they are accessible. Unlike extremely rare coins that cost thousands or even millions of dollars, wheat cents allow beginners to start exploring coin collecting without spending huge amounts of money. Yet within this series, there are still surprising discoveries waiting to be found. A simple penny can lead someone into the larger world of numismatics, the study and collecting of coins. People often begin by searching through jars of change, inherited collections, or rolls of pennies from the bank. The excitement comes from the possibility that an overlooked coin might turn out to be something special. The 1941 no-mint mark Lincoln penny sits in an interesting place within that story. It is common enough that many people have seen one, yet old enough to connect us to a very different time in history. Every small scratch or worn edge represents years of use in everyday American life. Think about how many hands that coin might have passed through. It may have bought a loaf of bread during the early 1940s, paid for a newspaper announcing historic events, or rested in a pocket during long train rides across the country. Coins are small objects, but they quietly travel through generations. That sense of history is one reason collectors continue to search for coins like the 1941 Lincoln cent. Even when the monetary value is modest, the historical value can be much greater. Holding a coin that is more than 8 decades old can feel like holding a tiny piece of the past, so the next time you come across a wheat penny in an old collection or a forgotten jar of change, take a closer look. Check the date, study the details, and imagine the journey that coin has taken since the day it left the Philadelphia Mint in 1941. Because sometimes the most ordinary-looking coin can tell an extraordinary story. And who knows, the next penny you examine might not just be spare change. It might be a small copper witness to history, waiting patiently to be rediscovered. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into a jar of old coins and pulling out a simple penny that looks ordinary at first glance. It's brown, worn, and probably looks just like thousands of others. But what if that small copper coin was actually part of a fascinating moment in American history, a moment connected to World War II, wartime shortages, and one of the most interesting stories in U.S. coinage? Today we're exploring the 1944 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that many people have seen, but very few truly understand. The 1944 Lincoln penny without a mint mark was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. During this time, the United States Mint did not place a mint mark on coins made in Philadelphia, which is why these pennies appear without any letter under the date. Millions of these coins were produced in 1944, and they were part of the Lincoln Cent series that first began in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. To understand the importance of the 1944 penny, we need to go back just 1 year earlier. In 1943, the United States was deep in World War II. Copper was an extremely important material for military equipment, ammunition, and communication wiring. Because of this shortage, the U.S. Mint made a dramatic change. Instead of using copper, pennies in 1943 were made from zinc-coated steel. These coins looked silver instead of the familiar copper color. However, the steel pennies quickly created problems. They rusted easily, they were often mistaken for dimes, and many people simply did not like them. Because of these issues, the mint decided to return to a copper-colored penny in 1944. But the country was still focused on conserving resources, so instead of using newly mined copper, the mint used recycled copper from spent shell casings collected from military training facilities. That means the 1944 Lincoln penny was literally made from materials that had been used in wartime ammunition. Each coin represents a small piece of that incredible moment in history when the entire country was working together to support the war effort. The design of the 1944 penny remained the same classic Lincoln cent design that Americans had known for decades. On the front of the coin is the profile of President Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head appears the motto, "In God We Trust." In front of his face is the word liberty, and the year 1944 is displayed near the bottom. The reverse side features two wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. At the top of the coin you can read the Latin phrase e pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. Because of these wheat stalks, collectors often refer to these coins as wheat pennies. The 1944 no-mint mark penny was struck in very large numbers. In fact, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 1 billion of them. Because of that, most 1944 pennies are not extremely rare by themselves. Many people still find them in old coin jars, inherited collections, and even in circulation decades ago. But what makes this coin truly interesting are the rare variations and errors that can occur. These unusual versions are the ones that collectors get excited about. One of the most famous and valuable versions of the 1944 penny is the 1944 steel penny. Remember those steel pennies from 1943? Occasionally, leftover steel planchets, which are the blank metal discs used to make coins, were accidentally left in the minting machines. When a 1944 design was struck on one of those steel blanks, it created a 1944 steel penny. This error coin is incredibly rare. Only a small number are known to exist. Because of that rarity, collectors are willing to pay huge amounts of money for one. In past auctions, genuine 1944 steel pennies have sold for well over $100,000, and in some cases even more depending on condition. Another rare variety involves errors in the striking process. Some 1944 pennies show doubled lettering or numbers, meaning parts of the design appear slightly duplicated. This happens when the die that stamps the coin shifts slightly between strikes. These doubled die coins can be worth far more than a normal example. There are also off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other minting mistakes that collectors actively search for. While most 1944 pennies are common, an unusual error can transform a simple coin into a valuable collector's item. For a standard 1944 no-mint mark penny, value depends heavily on condition. Coins that circulated for decades may only be worth a few cents or perhaps $1 or $2. But coins that were carefully preserved, especially those with bright original surfaces and minimal wear, can be worth significantly more. High-grade examples graded by professional coin grading companies can sell for dozens or even hundreds of dollars. Collectors are always looking for coins with sharp details, smooth surfaces, and minimal scratches. Because valuable error coins exist, it's important to know how to identify a real 1944 penny. First, check the color and metal. A normal 1944 penny should have a copper or bronze appearance. If the coin looks silver like a steel penny, that could be something extremely rare, but it must be verified carefully because many steel coins from 1943 are sometimes altered by changing the date. One simple test collectors use is a magnet. Steel pennies are magnetic, while copper pennies are not. If a 1944 penny sticks to a magnet, it may be one of the rare steel versions, but it should always be authenticated by a professional grading service to confirm its legitimacy. Another thing to examine is the weight. A normal copper 1944 penny weighs about 3.11 grams. A steel penny weighs slightly less, around 2.7 grams. A small digital scale can help collectors verify this. It's also important to examine the details of the date under magnification. Altered coins sometimes have the number 3 in 1943 modified to look like a 4. Under a magnifying glass, these alterations usually become obvious. Beyond its potential value, the 1944 penny also carries fascinating historical connections. These coins circulated during the final years of World War II. They were used by soldiers, families, factory workers, and children across the country. Every coin passed through countless hands during a time when the world was changing dramatically. Think about the possibility that a single 1944 penny could have been used to buy a newspaper reporting wartime news, or a piece of candy for a child waiting for a parent to return home from overseas. Coins like this quietly witnessed everyday life during one of the most important periods in modern history. Another interesting detail is that the recycled metal used for 1944 pennies came largely from fired shell casings. These casings were collected, melted down, and turned into coin blanks. In a way, the metal that once powered ammunition was transformed into everyday currency. Collectors love coins that tell a story, and the 1944 Lincoln penny tells a powerful one. It connects wartime industry, American history, and everyday life in a single small object. Today, collectors search through old jars, coin rolls, estate collections, and flea markets hoping to discover hidden treasures. Most 1944 pennies they find will be common, but the thrill of the hunt is what keeps people looking. The possibility that a rare error or steal version might appear makes every coin worth examining. Even if a coin is not extremely valuable, many collectors still keep them because of their historical significance. Holding a coin that circulated more than 80 years ago creates a tangible connection to the past. For new collectors, the 1944 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is often one of the first wheat pennies they encounter. It's common enough to find, but interesting enough to inspire curiosity about other coins in the series. Over time, that curiosity can grow into a deeper passion for coin collecting, learning about mint marks, die varieties, historical events, and the stories hidden behind small pieces of metal. So the next time you see a penny from 1944, take a closer look before tossing it aside. Check the color, examine the date, and consider the history it carries. What seems like a simple 1-cent coin might actually be connected to a remarkable chapter in American history. And who knows, hidden among ordinary coins could be a rare steel penny or a valuable mint error waiting to be discovered. That possibility is exactly what makes coin collecting so exciting. Sometimes the most ordinary objects hold the most extraordinary stories. And the 1944 Lincoln penny without a mint mark is a perfect example of how a tiny coin can carry history, mystery, and the thrill of discovery all at once. What if the small copper penny sitting quietly in a jar or hidden in an old drawer could tell the story of a nation just beginning to breathe again after one of the most difficult wars in human history? And what if that same ordinary-looking coin could actually be worth far more than 1 cent to the right collector? Today we're taking a closer look at the 1946 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that at first glance seems common, but holds a fascinating story from a remarkable moment in American history. The 1946 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series that first began in 1909. This coin was designed to honor President Abraham Lincoln on the 100th anniversary of his birth. On the front of the coin you see the familiar profile of Lincoln facing to the right, along with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the year of the coin to the right. On the reverse side, you'll find 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. Because of these wheat stalks, collectors often call these coins wheat pennies. The specific coin we're focusing on today is the 1946 penny with no mint mark. When collectors say no mint mark, they are referring to coins produced at the Philadelphia Mint. During that time, coins made in Philadelphia did not carry a mint mark, while coins from Denver carried a small D, and coins from San Francisco carried an S. So if you look at a 1946 penny and see no letter under the date, that means it was made in Philadelphia. But the story of this coin becomes more interesting when we consider the year it was produced. The year 1946 marked the first full year after World War II had ended. The United States was transitioning from a wartime economy back to civilian life. Factories that had been producing military equipment were shifting back to consumer goods. Soldiers were returning home. Families were rebuilding their lives. And everyday objects, including coins, began returning to their pre-war materials and designs. During the war, the United States had experimented with different metals for pennies. In 1943, for example, pennies were famously made from steel coated in zinc because copper was needed for ammunition and military equipment. But by 1946, the country had returned to the traditional bronze alloy used before the war. That means the 1946 Lincoln penny was made from about 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, giving it that familiar warm reddish-brown color. The coin measures about 19 millimeters in diameter and weighs roughly 3.11 grams. These specifications remained standard for Lincoln wheat pennies for decades. While millions of these coins were produced, their connection to the immediate post-war period makes them especially interesting to collectors and historians alike. In fact, the Philadelphia Mint produced a massive number of 1946 pennies. More than 991 million of them were struck that year. Because of this high mintage, the average circulated 1946 no-mint mark penny is not extremely rare. Many people still find them in old collections, coin jars, or inherited coin albums. However, that doesn't mean every 1946 penny is only worth 1 cent. Condition plays a huge role in determining a coin's value. Coins that have been heavily circulated often show wear on Lincoln's face and the wheat stalks on the reverse. These worn examples may sell for just a few cents or perhaps $1 or $2. But coins that survived in excellent condition can be significantly more valuable. Collectors pay close attention to coins graded in uncirculated condition, meaning they were never used in everyday transactions. These coins still display sharp details and often retain their original mint luster. Some of the most desirable examples are known as red coins, which still show their original bright copper-colored iron high grades. The value of a 1946 no-mint mark Lincoln penny can climb surprisingly high. For example, certified coins graded MS-65, which means gem uncirculated condition, have sold for several dozen dollars. Even higher grades can reach into the hundreds. In some auction records, exceptional examples graded MS-67 have sold for several $1,000s, especially if they display beautiful red surfaces and flawless detail. Another reason collectors study these coins closely is the possibility of mint errors. While the 1946 penny does not have a single famous error variety like some other years, errors can still occur during the minting process. These might include off-center strikes, double strikes, or coins struck on the wrong metal planchet. Error coins are always unique and can attract strong interest from collectors. One type of error collectors sometimes search for is doubling. This happens when parts of the design appear slightly duplicated because of movement during the striking process. On Lincoln pennies, collectors often examine the date, the word Liberty, and the lettering on the reverse for signs of doubling. While major double die varieties from 1946 are not extremely famous, subtle examples can still bring premium prices. So how can you tell if the 1946 penny you find is genuine? The first step is to look carefully at the basic details. The date should clearly read 1946, and there should be no mint mark under the date if it was struck in Philadelphia. The design should match the classic Lincoln wheat penny layout, with Lincoln's portrait on the front and the 2 wheat stalks on the back. Next, check the color and weight. A genuine 1946 penny should weigh close to 3.11 grams and have that copper-based appearance. Over time, the coin's color may change from bright red to reddish-brown or even dark brown due to oxidation. That natural aging is completely normal. Collectors also use magnification to examine the coin's details. Under a magnifying glass, the lines in Lincoln's hair, the folds in his coat, and the veins in the wheat stalks should appear sharp and well-defined on higher-quality coins. If the surfaces look unusually blurry or poorly formed, it may simply be a worn coin, but it is always worth comparing it to verified examples. Professional grading services can also authenticate and grade valuable coins. These organizations examine coins carefully, confirm that they are genuine, and assign them a numerical grade based on condition. Once graded, the coin is sealed in a protective holder that helps preserve it and gives buyers confidence in its authenticity. There are also a few fun facts about the 1946 Lincoln penny that many people find surprising. For example, although nearly 1 billion were made in Philadelphia, far fewer have survived in pristine condition. Most were used in everyday commerce for decades. That means truly high-grade examples are much scarcer than the original mintage numbers might suggest. Another interesting detail is that many 1946 pennies were saved by families right after the war. Some people collected them as souvenirs of a hopeful new era. Others simply kept them because wheat pennies already looked old-fashioned compared to newer coins. Over time, these small keepsakes became part of family coin collections passed down through generations. The Lincoln wheat penny design itself also carries historical significance. It was the first regular United States coin to feature a real person rather than a symbolic figure like Lady Liberty. This decision was controversial at the time, but it ultimately became one of the most enduring designs in American coinage history. Collectors today continue to love the 1946 no-mint mark penny because it represents a turning point. It is a reminder of the moment when the world began rebuilding after the devastation of war. Each coin is a small piece of that history, quietly circulating through the hands of millions of Americans during a time of optimism and change. For coin collectors, the excitement often comes from the hunt. A simple penny that many people overlook might turn out to be a high-grade example worth far more than expected. That possibility keeps collectors searching through rolls of pennies, old piggy banks, and inherited collections. The 1946 Lincoln penny may not always be the rarest coin in the series, but it remains one of the most meaningful. It connects everyday pocket change with a powerful historical moment and offers collectors the chance to hold a small artifact from the past. So the next time you come across an old wheat penny, take a moment to look closely at the date. If you see 1946 and no mint mark beneath it, you might be holding a coin that traveled through post-war America, passing from one hand to another during a time when the country was rebuilding and looking toward the future. And who knows? That quiet little penny might not just be a piece of copper. It could be a valuable collectible, a historical treasure, or the beginning of a brand new coin collecting journey. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into an old jar of coins, pulling out a single penny, and discovering that this tiny piece of copper could hold a story that stretches back more than 70 years. A coin that millions of people used every day in grocery stores, bus fares, and vending machines. But today, that same coin can capture the attention of collectors all across America. One small detail, something as simple as the absence of a mint mark, can turn an ordinary-looking penny into a fascinating piece of history. Today we're exploring the 1951 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that at first glance looks like any other penny, but carries with it a remarkable story about American history, coin production, and the world of collectors who spend years searching for the finest examples. The 1951 Lincoln penny was part of the famous Lincoln cent series. First, introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. This was the very first regular U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure instead of symbolic imagery. The design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, and it quickly became one of the most recognizable coins in the country. By 1951, the United States was entering a new era. World War II had ended only a few years earlier, and the country was experiencing rapid economic growth. Factories were busy, cities were expanding, and Americans were using coins every day in a booming economy. The penny remained an important part of daily life, and billions were produced to keep up with demand. The 1951 Lincoln penny was minted in 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Pennies from Denver carry a small D mint mark, and coins from San Francisco carry an S. But the coins struck in Philadelphia have no mint mark at all. That simple absence of a letter is what identifies the 1951 no mint mark penny. Philadelphia was the main mint facility in the United States, and it produced a massive number of pennies that year. In fact, more than 284 million Lincoln cents were struck in Philadelphia in 1951. Because of this large number, many people assume the coin is extremely common. And in circulated condition, it is indeed still widely found in old collections and coin jars. But the story becomes much more interesting when we begin to look closely at condition, quality, and the rare variations that collectors search for. The 1951 no mint mark Lincoln penny is made primarily of copper. The composition is 95% copper, with the remaining 5% made up of tin and zinc. Each coin weighs about 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters across. These specifications were standard for Lincoln pennies for many decades. On the front of the coin, known as the obverse, you see the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head is the word Liberty, while the date 1951 appears to the right. The phrase "In God We Trust" is displayed along the top edge. This design has remained one of the most beloved images in American coinage. On the back of the coin, known as the reverse, you'll find the classic wheat design. Two wheat stalks curve along the left and right edges, framing the words 1 cent and United States of America in the center. At the top is the Latin phrase e pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. This wheat reverse design was used from 1909 until 1958, when it was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design. Because the wheat reverse ended only a few years after 1951, many collectors today look back at these coins as a symbol of an earlier America. They represent the final years of a design that had already been part of American life for nearly half a century. But what makes the 1951 no-mint mark penny truly interesting to collectors is not just its history. It's the details hidden within the coin itself. First, condition plays a huge role in value. Most pennies from 1951 circulated for many years, passing from hand to hand in everyday transactions. These coins often show wear, scratches, and fading details. In this condition, they are usually worth only a small premium over face value. However, coins that were preserved in excellent condition tell a very different story. When a 1951 penny survives with sharp details, bright color, and minimal wear, collectors begin to take serious interest. Numismatists often describe copper coins using color categories. A freshly minted copper coin has a bright reddish appearance. Over time, exposure to air causes the copper to darken into a brown tone. Coins that remain bright red are much more desirable because they show how the coin originally looked when it left the mint. At a 1951 no-mint mark penny graded in lower circulated condition might sell for just a few cents or $1. But an uncirculated example with strong details can sell for several dollars, sometimes much more depending on the grade. When the coin is preserved in exceptional mint state condition, values can rise dramatically. High-grade examples graded MS-65 or higher by professional grading services can reach hundreds of dollars. The finest known examples have even crossed into the thousands at auction. Collectors also search for interesting mint errors associated with this coin. While the 1951 penny was produced in large numbers, small mistakes during the minting process can create unique variations that become highly desirable. One example is the double die effect, where parts of the design appear slightly doubled because of a misalignment during the die creation process. Another possibility includes off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or die cracks that form unusual patterns across the coin's surface. Although major error versions of the 1951 penny are not extremely common, when they do appear, they often attract strong attention from collectors who specialize in unusual minting mistakes. Another factor that makes this coin interesting is how collectors determine authenticity and quality. Genuine 1951 pennies should match the correct weight and metal composition. The details of Lincoln's portrait, the wheat stalks, and the lettering should appear sharp and consistent with official mint designs. Professional coin grading companies such as PCGS and NGC examine coins carefully under magnification. They check for signs of cleaning, damage, or alterations that might affect value. Once graded, the coin is sealed in a protective holder with a certification number, giving collectors confidence in its authenticity. For anyone curious about coins they already own, examining a penny closely can be surprisingly rewarding. Sometimes coins that appear ordinary at first glance can reveal hidden details when viewed under proper lighting and magnification. The 1951 penny also carries some fun historical connections. During the early 1950s, America was experiencing the rise of television, the expansion of highways, and the beginning of the baby boom generation. A simple penny from that time could have passed through countless hands. From corner diners to newspaper stands, it might have been used to buy a piece of candy for a child or dropped into a payphone to make a quick call. Each coin quietly traveled through everyday life, collecting small pieces of history along the way. Another surprising detail is how many collectors today focus specifically on wheat pennies like the 1951 issue. Some people attempt to build complete sets covering every year and mint mark from 1909 through 1958. Others search only for the highest quality examples with perfect surfaces and bright red color. For these collectors, even a common date like 1951 becomes exciting when discovered in exceptional condition. The challenge of finding a nearly flawless coin that survived decades without wear adds a sense of adventure to the hobby. And that is one of the reasons coins continue to fascinate people across generations. They are small objects, but they carry stories about art, economics, technology, and daily life in different eras. A single penny might seem insignificant, yet it can connect us directly to the past. It reminds us that history is not only found in textbooks or museums, but also in the everyday objects that once moved through people's hands. Today, collectors still search through rolls of pennies, estate collections, and old jars of coins hoping to find hidden treasures. While the 1951 no-mint mark Lincoln penny may not always command enormous prices, the best preserved examples remain highly respected within the numismatic community. And who knows, somewhere out there, a forgotten jar of old pennies may still contain a beautifully preserved 1951 coin waiting to be discovered. So the next time you see an old wheat penny, take a closer look, check the date, examine the details, and imagine the journey that small coin may have taken over the past 70 years. Because sometimes, the most ordinary-looking penny can open the door to an extraordinary story. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a simple penny. At first glance it looks ordinary, worn from years of use, the kind of coin people drop into jars or forget in the bottom of a drawer. But what if that small copper coin was actually a piece of history hiding in plain sight? What if that single penny could tell a story about America in the early 1950s and even be worth far more than its 1-cent face value? Today we're exploring the fascinating story of the 1952 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of Americans once carried but that collectors still search for today. The 1952 Lincoln penny is part of one of the most recognizable coin series in United States history. The Lincoln cent first appeared in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. It was the first regular United States coin to feature a real historical figure instead of the symbolic images used in earlier designs. By 1952, the Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for more than 4 decades, and it had become a familiar part of everyday American life. When people talk about the 1952 penny with no mint mark, they are referring to coins produced at the Philadelphia Mint. During that time, coins made in Philadelphia usually did not carry a mint mark. Only coins produced in other facilities like Denver or San Francisco displayed a small letter indicating where they were made. So if you look at a 1952 Lincoln penny and see no letter beneath the date on the front of the coin, it means it was struck in Philadelphia. The early 1950s were an interesting period in American history. The country was experiencing economic growth after World War II. Industries were expanding, suburbs were growing, and everyday commerce required billions of small coins for daily transactions. Pennies were essential for making change, buying newspapers, paying bus fares, and handling small purchases at local stores. Because of this demand, the Philadelphia Mint produced an enormous number of Lincoln cents in 1952. More than 186 million pennies were struck in Philadelphia that year. At first, that might make the coin sound common, and in many ways it is. Millions of these coins circulated for decades, passing through the hands of store clerks, children buying candy, and families saving spare change in jars. But what makes the 1952 no-mint mark penny interesting to collectors is not just the number that were produced, but the ones that survived in exceptional condition. To understand why collectors pay attention to this coin, we have to look at its design. The front of the coin, known as the obverse, features the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Lincoln faces to the right, with the words, "In God we trust," above his head. The word liberty appears on the left side of the coin, while the date 1952 is placed on the right. The reverse of the coin shows the classic wheat design that many collectors love. 2 wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America. Because of these wheat stalks, Lincoln pennies made between 1909 and 1958 are often called wheat pennies or wheat cents. This design remained unchanged for nearly 50 years before it was replaced in 1959 with the Lincoln Memorial design. The 1952 Lincoln penny is made mostly of copper. Its composition is about 95% copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. The coin weighs about 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters in diameter. These specifications remained mostly consistent for wheat pennies, except during the wartime year of 1943 when steel pennies were temporarily produced because copper was needed for the war effort. While the basic design of the 1952 penny is familiar, collectors are always interested in small variations and minting errors. These errors can occur during the striking process when the dies that press the design into the metal are slightly misaligned or worn. In some cases, collectors have discovered 1952 pennies with doubled letters, off-center strikes, or unusual surface marks created during the minting process. One of the most talked about possibilities is a double die error. This happens when the design is accidentally stamped twice onto the die at slightly different angles before coins are struck. The result can make parts of the lettering or numbers appear slightly doubled. While not extremely common for the 1952 penny, examples with noticeable doubling can attract attention from collectors and may be worth significantly more than a normal coin. Another factor that affects the value of a 1952 no-mint mark penny is its condition. Coins that circulated for years usually show heavy wear. The high points of the design, especially Lincoln's hair and the wheat stalks, become smooth over time. But occasionally a coin is preserved in almost perfect condition, perhaps saved in a collection or forgotten in a roll of uncirculated coins. Collectors grade coins on a scale that measures how well the original details have been preserved. A worn coin may only be worth a few cents, but a coin in mint state condition, meaning it was never used in circulation, can be worth much more. Bright red copper color also increases the value because most old pennies gradually darken with age. For example, a typical circulated 1952 no-mint mark penny might sell for just a few cents or perhaps $1 if it is in decent condition. But coins graded in high mint state conditions, especially those with strong red color, can sell for much higher prices at auctions. Some examples graded around MS-65 have sold for dozens of dollars, while even higher graded coins have reached prices over $100 depending on demand and iappeal.to some people that might still sound surprising. After all, the coin was originally worth just 1 cent. But collectors are often willing to pay more for coins that represent a specific moment in history and that have survived decades in remarkable condition. The 1952 penny represents the final years of the wheat cent era, which ended just 6 years later. If you think you might have a 1952 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, identifying it is relatively simple. First, look at the front of the coin and check the date. It should clearly read 1952. Next, examine the area just below the date. If there is no small letter like D or S, then the coin was struck in Philadelphia. That confirms it is the no mint mark variety. Next, examine the overall condition of the coin. Look closely at Lincoln's hair and the wheat stalks on the back. If those details are sharp and well defined, the coin may be in better condition than most circulated examples. Also check the color of the copper. A bright reddish tone usually means the coin has experienced less oxidation over time. Collectors also recommend using a magnifying glass or coin loop to check for possible errors or unusual features. Look closely at the numbers in the date and the letters in the words on the coin. If you notice doubling, unusual spacing, or anything that looks different from a normal penny, it might be worth showing to a professional coin dealer or sending to a grading service for evaluation. Of course, the world of coin collecting also attracts counterfeit coins, although fake 1952 pennies are relatively uncommon because the coin is not extremely rare. Still, collectors should be cautious. Authentic coins will have the correct weight and size, and the details should match the official design used by the United States Mint. If something looks unusual or poorly made, it could be a reproduction. There are also some fun facts about the Lincoln penny series that make the 1952 coin even more interesting. For example, the Lincoln cent is one of the longest-running coin designs in United States history. It has been produced for more than a century, though the reverse design has changed several times. The wheat design seen on the 1952 penny is often considered one of the most classic and beloved versions. Another interesting detail is that pennies from the early 1950s were among the last to be widely used in everyday small purchases before inflation gradually reduced the buying power of a single cent. In the 1950s, it was still possible to buy small items for just a few pennies, making the coin a truly practical part of daily life. Collectors today often enjoy building complete sets of wheat pennies from every year and mint location. The 1952 no-mint mark penny is an important piece in that collection. While it may not be the rarest coin in the series, it represents the craftsmanship of mid-century American coin production and the final chapter of the wheat cent design. For many collectors, the joy of owning a coin like this goes beyond its monetary value. Holding a 1952 penny can feel like holding a tiny piece of history, That coin might have traveled through diners, movie theaters, grocery stores, and gas stations more than 70 years ago. It might have been carried by someone during a time when televisions were new, highways were expanding, and America was stepping into a new era of modern life. And that is part of the magic of coin collecting. Every coin has a story. Some stories involve rare minting errors or record auction prices. Others are quieter, hidden in the everyday journeys of ordinary money passing from hand to hand. So the next time you come across an old jar of coins or receive change from a purchase, take a closer look. That small copper penny might not just be spare change. It could be a 1952 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a simple coin that has survived decades and continues to fascinate collectors around the world. Because sometimes the smallest pieces of history are the ones we overlook the most. And somewhere out there, perhaps in a forgotten coin jar or tucked inside an old drawer, another 1952 penny is waiting to be discovered. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a small copper penny that most people would ignore without a second thought. It looks ordinary, worn from years of use, maybe even forgotten in a jar somewhere. But what if that simple coin was quietly holding a story from more than 70 years ago? A story connected to American history, collectors, and even surprising value. Today we're exploring the fascinating story behind the 1953 mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that may look common but carries a history that many people never realize. The 1953 Lincoln penny is part of the famous Lincoln cent series, one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. This series first began in 1909 to celebrate the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. Before that time, most American coins featured symbolic figures like Lady Liberty. The Lincoln cent was the first regular United States coin to feature a real historical person, and it quickly became one of the most recognizable coins ever produced. By 1953, the United States was experiencing a time of growth and recovery after World War II. The country was entering a new era of economic expansion, and everyday coins like the Lincoln penny were being produced in huge numbers to support the growing economy. In that year, millions of pennies were struck across different mints, including the Denver Mint, which produced coins marked with a small letter D. That small letter D is an important detail. It tells collectors that the coin was struck at the Denver Mint in Colorado. The mint mark appears just below the date on the front of the coin. While Philadelphia coins from that era usually had no mint mark, the Denver and San Francisco mints used letters to identify where the coin was made. The 1953 Lincoln penny features the classic wheat cent design. On the front of the coin is the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Lincoln is shown facing to the right, with the words "In God We Trust" along the top edge of the coin. The word Liberty appears to the left of Lincoln, while the year 1953 and the small D mint mark appear to the right. When you flip the coin over, you'll see the famous wheat ears design. Two curved wheat stalks frame the edges of the reverse side. In the center are the words 1 cent and United States of America, with the Latin phrase E pluribus unum across the top. This wheat design remained on the penny from 1909 until 1958, when it was eventually replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design. The coin itself is made mostly of copper. During the early 1950s, Lincoln pennies were composed of about 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This composition gives the coin its distinctive reddish color when it is new. Over time, exposure to air and handling causes the surface to darken into a brown tone, which is why many older pennies appear much darker today. Now you might be wondering what makes the 1953 penny interesting to collectors. After all, millions of these coins were produced. In fact, the Denver Mint struck more than 700 million pennies that year. With such a large mintage, it might seem like the coin should be extremely common. However, coin collecting is not just about how many were made. Condition plays a huge role in determining value. Many of the 1953 pennies were heavily used in everyday transactions for decades. As a result, coins that remain in excellent condition today can be surprisingly desirable. Collectors especially look for coins that still have their original red color. A freshly minted copper penny has a bright reddish shine that collectors refer to as red. As the coin ages and oxidizes, it becomes red-brown and eventually fully brown. The more original red color that remains on a coin, the more valuable it can be. For example, A heavily circulated 1953 penny might only be worth a few cents above face value. But a well-preserved coin in uncirculated condition can sell for several dollars or more. And in rare cases where the coin is in near-perfect condition with full original red luster, collectors have paid much higher prices. Professional coin grading services carefully evaluate these coins using a scale that ranges from poor all the way up to mint state 70. A high-grade coin means it shows very little wear, strong details, and excellent eye appeal. Some top-quality examples of the 1953 Lincoln penny have sold at auction for impressive amounts. A superb uncirculated coin with strong red color can reach into the hundreds of dollars depending on its grade. For collectors who specialize in high-grade wheat cents, finding a beautifully preserved example from the early 1950s can be an exciting discovery. Another reason collectors search for these pennies is the possibility of mint errors. During the coin production process, mistakes sometimes occur. These errors can include doubled lettering, off-center strikes, or die cracks in the metal. While major errors for the 1953 penny are not extremely common, collectors have discovered minor varieties and interesting die flaws over the years. Even small imperfections can make a coin more interesting to collectors because they reveal the human side of the minting process. If you ever come across a 1953 penny, there are a few simple ways to identify it. First, check the date on the front of the coin and confirm that it reads 1953. Next, look for the small letter D located just below the date. This indicates that the coin was struck in Denver. Then take a closer look at the overall design. You should see Lincoln's portrait on the front and the wheat ears on the back. The lettering should appear sharp and clear, although wear from circulation may soften some of the details. Weight and size can also help confirm authenticity. A genuine wheat penny typically weighs about 3.11 grams and measures around 19 millimeters in diameter. Most counterfeit coins fail to match these exact specifications. Another helpful step is to examine the surface of the coin under good lighting. Authentic copper pennies from this era often show natural aging, subtle color changes, and small marks from circulation. Extremely shiny or oddly colored coins may have been cleaned or altered, which can reduce collector value. One interesting fact about wheat pennies like the 1953 is how widely they circulated across the country. These coins passed through countless hands, from grocery stores and gas stations to school lunch lines and vending machines. Each coin quietly became part of everyday life in America. Think about how many stories a single coin might hold. It may have traveled through several states, been carried in wallets and pockets, and even sat forgotten in a piggy bank for decades before someone rediscovered it. Another surprising detail is that wheat pennies were once so common that people rarely thought about saving them. Many were spent, lost, or melted down over time. That means finding high-quality examples today can be much more difficult than it once was. Collectors also appreciate the artistic design of the wheat cent. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln has become one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. Even after more than a century, the design still feels classic and dignified. The wheat ears on the reverse side symbolize growth and prosperity, which was an important message during the early 20th century when the design was first introduced. These simple elements gave the penny a timeless look that collectors continue to admire. Today, many coin collectors enjoy building complete sets of Lincoln wheat pennies by year and mint mark. This means tracking down coins from every mint that produced them. The 1953 penny is an essential piece of that puzzle for anyone completing a wheat cent collection. Searching for these coins can be part of the fun. Some collectors hunt through old coin jars, inherited collections, or rolls of pennies from the bank. Every search carries the excitement that an overlooked treasure might appear. Even if a 1953 penny is not worth hundreds of dollars, it still represents a small piece of American history. Holding one is like holding a snapshot of the early 1950s, a time when televisions were becoming popular, highways were expanding, and everyday Americans used coins like this in their daily routines. That is part of what makes coin collecting so fascinating. Each coin is more than just metal. It is a connection to the people, economy, and culture of the time when it was made. So the next time you see a wheat penny, take a closer look. Check the date. Look for that small mint mark. You might be holding a 1953 Lincoln penny that has traveled across decades to reach your hands. And who knows? Hidden in an old jar of change or tucked away in a forgotten drawer, there could still be remarkable coins waiting to be rediscovered. Coins that once seemed ordinary can suddenly become windows into history, reminding us that sometimes the smallest pieces of metal carry the biggest stories. Imagine pulling a small copper penny from your pocket change and discovering it might be worth hundreds, or even thousands of dollars. It sounds impossible, but for some collectors, that moment has actually happened. Hidden among millions of ordinary coins are a few that carry unusual stories, rare characteristics, and surprising value. One of those coins is the 1955 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that at first glance looks completely ordinary, yet continues to attract the attention of collectors across the United States. The 1955 D Lincoln penny is part of the famous Lincoln cent series, one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. The Lincoln penny was first introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was also the first regular circulating U.S. coin to feature the portrait of a real historical figure. Before that, American coins mostly displayed symbolic images like Lady Liberty. The design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, whose work gave the coin its iconic look that many Americans instantly recognize. By the time the year 1955 arrived, the Lincoln cent had already been circulating for nearly half a century. The United States was experiencing a period of economic growth after World War II. Businesses were expanding, families were buying homes, and everyday commerce required a steady supply of small change. Because of this demand, the U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies each year. In 1955, Lincoln cents were struck at multiple mint facilities, including Philadelphia and Denver. The coins made in Denver carried a small D Mint mark below the date on the front of the coin. The Denver Mint produced more than 560 million Lincoln pennies in 1955. That number may sound enormous, and in many ways it is. Millions of these coins circulated through banks, grocery stores, and cash registers across the country. Most of them lived simple lives in pocket change and eventually disappeared into jars, drawers, or coin rolls. Yet despite the large mintage, collectors still search carefully through old pennies looking for the 1955 D version. Because some examples are far more desirable than others. To understand why collectors care about this coin, it helps to look closely at its design. On the front of the coin, known as the obverse, you will see the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head is the motto, "In God We Trust." To the left is the word "Liberty." And to the right of Lincoln's portrait is the date 1955 with the small letter D just beneath it. This tiny mint mark tells us the coin was produced in Denver. The back of the coin, called the reverse, features two wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. At the top appears the motto E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. Because of this wheat design, Lincoln pennies made between 1909 and 1958 are often called wheat pennies or wheat cents. For many collectors, these wheat pennies represent a classic era of American coinage. The metal composition of the 1955 D Lincoln penny is also interesting. It is made mostly of copper, about 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This gives the coin its warm reddish color when it is freshly minted. Over time, as the coin circulates and reacts with air, the surface can darken to a brown tone. Collectors often classify these coins by color, using terms like red, red-brown, and brown. Coins that still retain their original bright red color are usually considered more valuable. Now, when people hear about the year 1955 in connection with Lincoln pennies, many immediately think about the famous 1955 double die penny. That error coin, produced in Philadelphia without a mint mark, shows dramatic doubling in the lettering and date and has become one of the most famous error coins in American history. But the 1955 D penny from Denver is a different story. It does not feature that dramatic double die, yet it still holds its own interest for collectors because of condition rarity and smaller varieties that specialists enjoy studying. Over the decades, collectors noticed that certain 1955 D pennies were struck with sharper details than others. Some coins show strong lines in Lincoln's hair, clear wheat stalks on the reverse, and well-defined lettering. Others appear weaker due to worn dies or softer strikes during the minting process. High-quality examples that survived without heavy circulation are surprisingly difficult to find today. This is where the idea of grading becomes important. Coin grading companies evaluate coins based on their condition, ranging from heavily worn pieces to nearly perfect uncirculated examples. Most 1955D pennies that people find in circulation today are in lower grades, meaning they show noticeable wear from years of handling. These coins might only be worth a few cents or perhaps a small premium over face value. However, when a 1955D penny is discovered in extremely high condition, collectors become very interested. A well-preserved, uncirculated coin with strong luster and minimal marks can sell for much higher prices. In some cases, professionally graded examples in very high mint state grades have sold for hundreds of dollars at auction. The exact value depends heavily on condition, color, and eye appeal. For example, a typical circulated 1955D penny might sell for a few dollars at most. But an uncirculated red example graded at a high mint state level can bring prices ranging from around $50 to several $100s. In rare cases where the coin is exceptionally well preserved with full red color and minimal imperfections, auction prices have climbed even higher. This dramatic difference in value shows how important condition is in the world of coin collecting. If you happen to have a jar of old pennies at home, you might be wondering how to identify a genuine 1955D Lincoln penny. The first step is simple. Look at the date on the front of the coin. It should clearly read 1955. Just below the date, you should see a small letter D. That mint mark is the key indicator that the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. Next, examine the overall design. Lincoln's portrait should match the classic wheat penny style used from 1909 through 1958. On the back, you should see the two wheat stalks surrounding the denomination and country name. The metal should appear copper-colored rather than silver-colored, since pennies did not switch to copper-plated zinc until many years later. Collectors also recommend using a magnifying glass or coin loop to inspect the coin more closely. Look for signs of tampering, such as an added mint mark or unusual surface marks. While counterfeiting common pennies is not very profitable, altered coins do exist. For valuable coins, many collectors choose to have them authenticated and graded by professional grading services. This process confirms the coin's authenticity and provides an official condition grade that buyers trust. Beyond value and identification, the 1955D penny carries a few interesting stories that make it fun to collect. During the 1950s, pennies were still an important part of everyday life. You could buy candy, newspapers, or small items for just a few cents. Children often saved pennies in piggy banks, and many adults kept them in glass jars on kitchen shelves. Coins like the 1955D penny quietly passed through countless hands, witnessing everyday moments of American life. Another fascinating detail is how many of these coins have survived. Because people eventually began saving wheat pennies as collectibles, large numbers were pulled out of circulation during the 1960s and 1970s. This is one reason collectors today can still find examples of the 1955D penny with decent detail, even though the coin is more than 70 years old. Collectors also enjoy searching for subtle varieties within the 1955D issue. Small differences in die polishing, lettering spacing, or strike quality can make certain coins stand out to specialists. For some hobbyists, the excitement comes from examining hundreds of coins under magnification, hoping to discover a unique variety that others might overlook. The reason collectors continue to love the 1955D Lincoln penny today is simple. It represents a connection to American history, everyday commerce, and the classic design of the wheat cent era. Even though it was produced in large numbers, finding a truly beautiful example still feels special. Each coin carries the marks of time and the story of where it may have traveled. For beginners, the 1955D penny is also an accessible starting point. Unlike extremely rare coins that cost thousands of dollars, many examples of this coin can still be collected at reasonable prices. That makes it a perfect coin for people who are just beginning their journey into the world of coin collecting. And perhaps the most exciting part is the possibility of discovery. Old coin jars, inherited collections, and pocket change sometimes contain surprises. A penny that looks ordinary could turn out to be a well-preserved 1955D example worth far more than 1 cent. That sense of possibility keeps collectors searching year after year, so the next time you see a worn copper penny, take a moment to look at the date and the tiny mint mark beneath it. You might just be holding a small piece of American history, and who knows, Hidden among those humble coins could be a 1955 D Lincoln penny waiting to tell its story once again. Welcome back. Imagine holding a small piece of history in the palm of your hand, a coin so ordinary in appearance that most people pass it by without a second thought. But this is no ordinary penny. This is a 1956 D Lincoln penny, a coin that quietly carries decades of American history and, for collectors, a story of rarity, intrigue, and potential value. What if the coin sitting in your drawer could be worth far more than its face value? Today, we're diving deep into the world of the 1956 D Lincoln penny, exploring its history, unique features, and why collectors still seek it out more than 60 years after it was first minted. The 1956 D Lincoln penny is part of a series that has been in continuous production since 1909, honoring Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. The D Mint mark indicates that this coin was produced at the Denver Mint, one of the nation's key coin-making facilities. Unlike some coins that capture attention because of dramatic designs or unusual metals, this penny's story lies in its age, scarcity in high grades, and the subtle details that make it a collector's treasure. At first glance, it may seem like a simple copper-colored cent, but there's much more than meets the eye. To understand this penny, it helps to take a step back to 1956. America was in the midst of a post-war boom. The economy was thriving, families were moving into new suburban neighborhoods, and the country was looking forward to a future of progress and prosperity. Coins like the Lincoln penny were everyday tools of commerce used to buy goods, save for small treats, and occasionally tucked into jars for future spending. The 1956 D penny was minted during a time when the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of coins to meet the growing demand across the country. The design of the 1956 D Lincoln penny is classic and recognizable. On the obverse, or front, you have Abraham Lincoln's portrait, a design by Victor David Brenner that has been used since 1909. Lincoln's profile is sharp, his beard detailed, and the inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the year 1956 clearly visible. On the reverse, you find the iconic wheat ears, a design that was used from 1909 to 1958, symbolizing prosperity and growth. This combination of artistry and symbolism is part of what makes the Lincoln Wheat Penny series so beloved by collectors. The coin itself is composed mostly of copper, about 95%, with the remainder made up of tin and zinc, giving it that warm, reddish-brown tone. While the 1956 D Lincoln penny is not as dramatically rare as some other coins in the Lincoln series, its value comes from a few key factors. First, coins from the 1950s can be difficult to find in uncirculated condition. The vast majority of pennies minted in 1956 have been handled, spent, or stored in less than ideal conditions, leaving collectors searching for coins with crisp details, strong luster, and minimal wear. Additionally, some coins from this year exhibit minor minting errors, like doubled dies or small striking imperfections, which can make them particularly desirable. A coin with even subtle anomalies can catch the eye of serious collectors and drive its value well above that of a standard penny. To give a sense of the market, circulated 1956 D pennies generally sell for only a few cents above face value, making them accessible to almost any collector. However, uncirculated examples, especially those graded MS-65 or higher by professional grading services, can fetch $50 or more. Coins with verified errors or exceptional surfaces have sold at auction for hundreds of dollars, sometimes even higher if they are flawless and highly sought after. For someone who has been collecting Lincoln cents for decades, finding a high-grade 1956 D penny can feel like discovering a hidden gem. Identifying a genuine 1956 D Lincoln penny is simpler than it seems, but attention to detail is crucial. First, check the mint mark. The D should appear just below the date on the obverse side of the coin. On authentic coins, this mark is well-formed, clear, and consistent with other coins from the same year. The copper alloy should feel smooth yet solid, with a reddish-brown tone that may darken slightly with age but shouldn't look artificial or painted. For coins suspected of having errors or high-grade condition, collectors often rely on magnification to examine the details of Lincoln's portrait, the wheat ears, and the edges. Fakes or altered coins often show inconsistencies in these fine details. Consulting a reputable grading service or experienced coin dealer is the safest way to confirm authenticity, especially for coins that could have significant value. There are also some fun and surprising details that make the 1956 D penny stand out. For one, pennies from the mid-1950s were part of a transitional period in coin production. The Denver Mint was experimenting with slight variations in striking pressure and metal composition to ensure long-lasting coins that could withstand decades of circulation. This means that even among standard coins, no two are exactly alike, and collectors can spend years studying subtle differences in color, luster, and strike. Additionally, the wheat ear design would only appear for a couple more years before the United States switched to the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959, making the 1956 D one of the last pennies of this iconic style. Collectors love the 1956 D Lincoln penny not just for its potential monetary value, but for the connection it provides to American history. Holding this coin is like holding a tiny piece of the 1950s, a time capsule from an era of optimism, growth, and change. For many, collecting these pennies is about more than money. It's about preserving history, appreciating artistry, and experiencing the thrill of the hunt. A well-preserved 1956 D penny can evoke memories of a simpler time, inspire curiosity about the past, and even serve as a tangible link between generations of collectors. If you're interested in collecting or selling, the 1956 D Lincoln penny is a perfect example of a coin that rewards patience, knowledge, and attention to detail. Even everyday coins, often overlooked in jars and drawers, can have stories waiting to be discovered. Every scratch, color variation, and small error adds to the narrative of the coin, telling a tale that spans decades. For someone just beginning their collection, finding a genuine, high-quality 1956 D penny can be a thrilling moment. A reminder that history can be found in the most ordinary of objects, so next time you come across a small, unassuming copper penny, take a closer look. Could it be a 1956 D Lincoln penny hiding quietly among your change? Could it carry a story that connects you to the past, to collectors, and to a history that is both rich and fascinating? Coins like this remind us that value isn't always obvious at first glance. The ordinary can be extraordinary, and the right coin at the right time can open a doorway to decades of history, curiosity, and discovery. The 1956 D Lincoln penny is more than just currency. It's a piece of America's story, waiting for those who are willing to look closely and explore its hidden details. History, artistry, rarity, and a touch of mystery all come together in this humble coin, creating a collectible that continues to captivate enthusiasts today. Whether you're an experienced collector or someone just beginning to explore the world of coins, the 1956 D Lincoln penny offers a journey into the past, an appreciation for craftsmanship, and a chance to hold a small but meaningful piece of history in your hands. So, keep your eyes open, check those pennies, and who knows? Among your change, you might just find a coin that has been waiting for decades to tell its story. Every coin has a story, and the 1956 D Lincoln penny is no exception. It reminds us that even the smallest objects can hold a lifetime of history, mystery, and value. Take a closer look at your pennies, and let curiosity guide you. You never know what hidden treasures you might uncover. The ordinary often conceals the extraordinary, and sometimes, the journey of discovery begins with a simple glance at a copper coin.